Having gone through these core 4 problems, in the interest of being even-handed, I want to discuss positive things we can say about a theoretical Long Night prequel. Emphasis on theoretical. In order to contrast what they ultimately make with the best they possibly could. That despite all of these flaws, there is a best possible one they could have made, and they're not even going to make that. You can just tell. That in the few interviews they've done, which were evasive, again from the Entertainment Weekly one with Casey Bloys, really the only description he's given of it is, it feels distinct, it's a different world, the kingdoms do not exist at this point. All we're told is the absence of things. Well, King's Landing doesn't exist. The 7 kingdoms don't exist. Without saying, okay, what is in it? This isn't process of elimination. So what I'm going to go over here is, rather than talk about absence of things, can you at least phrase that as the presence of something new? And I'm not saying, oh, this is fake, they're putting a bad spin on it. Just, no, as a book fan, if Martin wanted to put out another prequel novella about this, I could get interested in it. Instead of just emphasizing nothing is there, well, what is there? Not the 7 kingdoms don't exist, but theoretically, Westeros is an interesting patchwork of dozens of petty kingdoms, each with their own diverse customs and court politics. Reading The World of Ice and Fire, when they talk about the Age of Heroes after the Long Night ended, but before the Andal invasions, it's interesting reading the maybe 1 page of information on this is how the early Stark kings won the submission of the Glover kings, and then the Marsh kings of the Neck, and the Dustins, and how they cobbled together the North, is a narrative and interesting, and well, what were the independent kingdoms like, these petty kingdoms? You could do that. The biggest selling point by far that sets us apart from everything else is the Age of Heroes is a great age of magic and wonders. The age of magic before the Long Night. Magical forces dwindled in power over the eons steadily, to the point most people think it was all myth. Magic was never more powerful than at this time. Even things about Valyria and the Dragon Lords 5,000 years ago to 1,000 years ago, they say that was an ember, an echo of how powerful magic was during the Dawn Age and the Age of Heroes, where they were drowning continents and things. So this is officially the prequel concept, theoretically, which would have the most magic in it. Wargs and skin changers, a green sight prophetic visions, the Hammer of the Waters. And separate from magic explicitly, another big selling point is, if I were making my theoretical book fan wish list prequel series in the Long Night, rare megafauna by the time of the War of the Five Kings were thriving during the Age of Heroes. The dire wolves, mammoths, they also mention cave lions. There used to be cave lions, which are bigger than regular lions, in the Westerlands. That dire wolves haven't been south of the Wall in 200 years, and I kind of hope like a Targaryen Conquest TV series would show the Starks having a few dire wolves still in the north, because they said they weren't extinct south of the Wall then. But, the Age of Heroes, you would see mammoths all over the place, dire wolves, a lot of them, and they say, not just, they're wild animals, that because the children of the forest could warg into dire wolves, that they would send armies of dire wolves at the First Men, mind-controlled with magic, to attack them with beasts and crocodiles and things, and lizard lions. So you would actually see quite a lot of that from an environmental standpoint, they're not exactly like our world. They've got a lot more Ice Age megafauna animals that died out in our world are still alive there. That is a selling point. And of course, a prequel this long ago is truly the only era when non-human races openly interacted with human cultures in large numbers. they're considered purely mythical in later ages, that they were the children of the forest. The few that survived the long night south of the wall were wiped out by the Andals, and there weren't even that many left, except that there were a couple in the Stormlands, in the Riverlands, but they weren't that connected with humanity anymore. That Targaryen Conquest or Dance of the Dragons or Valyria prequel or something, or Bravos, you would never see non-human races. They're considered mythical. This is the only period where you would, like Lord of the Rings type fantasy, where you see these other races. Martin always said that the children of the forest aren't explicitly my version of elves. Elves have been done to death. That they're druidic, like Celtic myth, and I can see that he was trying to steer clear of that. They're like little humanoid squirrels almost, the way they're described in the books. They're really not exactly like humans. They have clawed hands, like a cat. And you could also see the giants in significant numbers. The books actually show them more, because budget and stuff, and the book version of the giants is a lot better, that they're not nearly as human. They're basically Bigfoot, Sasquatch, like Wookiees, but they're 14 feet tall. And I understand, a TV show couldn't do that at that budget, but it's more interesting that way. That's how I would do it. That they were all over the place during that time period, fighting with the children of the forest and with humans. So those are the big selling points of a theoretical, there was like a comic book or a novella. Well, there's more magic, there's more Ice Age megafauna, big animals. And this is the only prequel era where you'd actually regularly interact with the non-human races. There is no guarantee that HBO will make that theoretical, best possible Long Night prequel. The one that's in your head, the one that's in my head, even the one that George R.R. Martin would make, knowing he was limited by a TV budget, because other writers aren't as smart as possible. That we're not getting a Spielberg or a J.J. Abrams making everything. What if we get someone who doesn't really know what they're doing? Even George R.R. Martin would have trouble making a full prequel in that setting. In fact, he's never felt the urge to write about it that much. What I'm getting around to saying is that I've seen rampant wishful thinking or denial, or maybe just ignorance, I don't know which is worse, of news sites even, or just saying, well, of course we'll see Ashai, the Giscari Empire, and Old Town, and Land the Clever will be a main character working with Bran the Builder and Azor Ahai. That they didn't put much thought into this, and just, you seriously think that would be in a TV show? How many major locations do they have in terms of physical production in sets per year? Maybe 4 or 5 on the scale. A fully realized set like King's Landing or Winterfell, they never even built up like Volantis or Pentos that much. Bravos was a fully realized setting because a lot of action was set there, but you think this is going to be about the Long Night, and that the Giscari Empire will be a major player in it. That we, not just like a cameo, but no, a ton of the story will be set there. When this is probably the one prequel you could pick that would have the absolute least to do with continents outside of Westeros. Yes, it is implied because of the Azor Ahai myth that there are some connections to the mysteries of the East, but we don't know if we'd go there or people from there come to Westeros. And what I'm reacting to isn't wish lists, okay? Wishful thinking. Like, I would like to have, if I were doing a 7-season Long Night prequel, not that I would in the first place, I would make one episode showing the Summer Isles or the Giscari Empire as a cameo, but it wouldn't be a recurring location. This is just shallow thinking. You're not thinking out, how much would this realistically appear in a show that's really about the Starks? And it's not just that they're entertaining wish lists, it's that they're treating it as a given, as we will assuredly see these, is what really frightens me. And it's mainstream news sites who I actually respect in other matters going, well, of course we'll see this. Not like winteriscoming.net. They openly said this isn't a very good idea for a prequel, and there are problems with it. Just after the announcement came out, like, and people making videos, news videos, listing off, well, of course we'll see the Giscari Empire. What do they have to do with this? A shy? Maybe. In flashback, if there's a character from the East, that's a separate question. But they were really not being objective about it, and just are you sure we'll see that? The same baseless, wishful thinking we saw before Season 5 TV Dorn. That I honestly thought, well, of course we'll see Ariane Martel, and I was surprised when they cut her out, when that's something that would be crazy to cut out. If you're going to do it, either you do it with her or not at all. This isn't an accident. HBO benefits from not releasing info about the Long Night prequel. Just in these 8 months, empty platitudes and vague promises. That if they were doing Targaryen Conquest, you can point to the novella and pick apart, well, would this make a good TV show or not? What do you think of it, people who didn't read it before? Mainstream media. We know nothing about this. Not just, oh, you're not really sure how they'll handle Dance of the Dragons. We know nothing, and that plays into their hands. And they just keep punting, moving the goalposts. That, well, it's going to be great. It's going to be exciting. By keeping it vague and not saying anything about it on purpose, everyone just projects all of their own wishes onto it. And this isn't books versus TV series fans. From one human being to another, like if you were asked what you would like to see in the next Star Wars movie, there's variation from one person to the next, even on a level of dialogue or something. But whatever any one person thinks is the best possible fit for them. I kind of think about this in Simpsons terms, that if you ask them to mentally picture what their hypothetical perfect movie is, and to go and make it, there's a difference between the thought bubble in Bart Simpson's head, in Lisa's head, and groundskeeper Willie's head. That every person thinks it'll be the best thing they can, like horror movies where they don't actually show the monster. It's whatever you think is scariest. An intelligent person will think of some really complicated, amazing, difficult to even describe thing like Ridley Scott's Alien, versus someone who goes, wow, it's a guy with a knife, but that's the scariest thing to them. That when you leave it off screen, when it's just vague and empty platitudes, people project whatever their greatest fear is in horror movies, or whatever their greatest hopes are onto something. And that's a major principle of, political propaganda. Make empty promises that don't actually say anything specific. I'm not saying, they're students of propaganda, just that's common sense, that if you leave it vague, people want to believe you, and they'll project whatever they want onto it. Even things about, like, for the past over a year, when the cast keeps going, there's so much pressure on Season 8 being great, can you tell us about it? And they just go, it'll be amazing, and people report on that in news posts, as if this isn't news, they didn't say anything. They made a vague promise, it'll be good. People project what they want onto it. So I've seen so many people, and I hope you've been watching this long into this long video, you're thinking of what the best possible Long Night prequel could be, not what they're making it, and they're hiding what they're really doing from you. And this is worse for TV first casual viewers. I really feel, I'm not dumping on them that they're less intelligent, they're just less exposed, because a lot of the people who are hyping this stuff up are people who read the books but went all in for the TV show because they enjoy the hype. That they know it isn't the same. And I've seen intelligent TV-only fans who really grew to hate what they did Season 5 onwards. It's a matter of people who are sucked into the hype or not. But it's so worse for casual TV viewers, many of whom don't even like Game of Thrones that much anymore, who are building up all these hopes for Long Night. And I've seen them, people hyping, like the MarySue.com had a whole article on, we're really hyped that it has a female showrunner and has a female director for the pilot. And that isn't, if I hadn't known more stuff, I would be excited too. But even then, there's so many problems that you're grasping at straws because you need it to be better. This is worse for TV-first casual viewers because they just assume that it's the prequel. It will be like Game of Thrones. Some of these people, I don't think they even know what The Long Night is. That they just heard Naomi Watts was cast in the Game of Thrones prequel. And they don't even know that it's about the Age of Heroes, that they're just reacting to news headlines and assuming well, it'll be something great. People who don't, even a bit more than that, people who don't understand that there is no pre-existing narrative by George R.R. Martin for this, don't understand that there was nothing in Westeros at this time, that it won't be like that. As I said before, most of Westeros was still just primeval forest at the time of the Long Night. It's Bronze Age Britain. That you could make an argument between, Martin said one other prequel will be set outside of Westeros, and I'm pretty sure it's a Max Borenstein one, and there is an argument between a prequel set in Essos with all these crazy, exciting new locations we've never seen before on screen, or a prequel set during the Dance of the Dragons. The Dance of the Dragons actually doesn't have really many new locations in it, like King's Landing, Dragonstone, and Harrenhal, and battlefields and stuff. So you would see a lot of familiar locations. That's a selling point, that the Dance of the Dragons, you would see all these favorite locations again, but mixed with new characters and plot lines and motivations. It would be an interesting debate if it was head-to-head between should we do Dance of the Dragons or like a Valyria prequel. And there are arguments to both sides. But it isn't that. It isn't these two poles of, well, we could do a Valyria prequel, or we could do, which is the new exciting stuff, or Long Night, which is the familiar stuff. No. Dance of the Dragons was the familiar stuff. Pole of that argument. This is, there's nothing in Westeros. And I've spent the past 2 hours showing you, there's nothing there. If you're going, well, we'll see Westeros again. If you define Westeros as King's Landing, no, you won't see that again. You won't see Harrenhal again, or Dragonstone. You would see a primitive ringfort version of Winterfell at best. The Wall wouldn't be in it for most of its run. There aren't that many towns or cities even. It's not like, well, we'd find new castles. There wasn't that much there. It's forests. And I really hope that comes up in some sort of goddamned Q&A at some point where someone goes, well, what is the setting of this? That the worst case scenario, and this is admittedly the worst case scenario of several, and you're trying to be even-handed with, well, I can't judge what I haven't seen, but there's only so many things they can do. The worst case scenario that we're dealing with is that it's just a Jon Snow copy character, just this is a Jon Snow ripoff, running around in wilderness, not settings, hacking at undead whites. And really, we already saw this. We already saw this with the White Hunt in Season 7, with people criticizing that. Please talk about this in the comments. That is the direction they've been drifting towards, that they've been going in. That increasingly it wasn't, oh, we need sets or plots. Just celebrity actors hacking at ice zombies in the middle of woods and ice. That's what I fear it's going to be, worst case of several. Just a Jon Snow copy in the woods doing promo glares at the Night King with no dialogue to show off these performances and these faces. More awards baiting. So there are these four major problems, that it's a rehash of the White Walkers, it isn't based on a Martin narrative, there are no narratives or characters even in outline form from the novels, there's no stories from then really, nor would there be anything physically there, it's just the absence of things. Being objective, does the fact that none of the story or characters in Long Night are really based on any significant material that George R. R. Martin wrote automatically mean it will be bad? No. But it doesn't automatically mean it will be good either. And I've seen so many people and major news sites just assuming it'll automatically be good because they're at that point where if they stuck with it this long through seasons 5 to 7, they're automatically praising everything HBO puts out. That they have ceased to be... Remember how great it was in season 2 where people were objectively criticizing and measuring things? And not just, oh, it's terrible or it's great, but measured responses to decisions and picking them apart. You can tell when you're in like a cult-like situation of yes men where people are just using superlatives. It's the best ever, it's the best ever. And there's no analysis. That no one was measuring it. Some of these sites really weren't measuring what it would mean to make a Long Night prequel. And I use the picture of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which was a praised video game narrative versus Star Wars Resistance. I've seen some people saying they like Star Wars Resistance. I don't mean to make fun of that. But just, you wouldn't say, I liked Knights of the Old Republic, therefore Resistance will automatically be good. That they're not made by the same set of people at all, and it's not based on a story from the other one. So by that logic of maybe it would be good independently, you don't know, but it's just one doesn't flow from the other. It isn't automatic. Casting news has been coming out a bit, not recently, but from around November to January, we got a few big announcements. And I split this off into a separate video. I don't want to repeat all of it here. I went through this in detail of picking apart who's playing what. I'll link it at the end of this. Who is cast as what roles in the Long Night prequel to Game of Thrones? Not talking about what characters they're playing, but compared to the casting sheets we got, who matches these age descriptions, that kind of thing. And just going through it here, we noticed, well, there's black people in it. There aren't Latinos in it, and there aren't East Asian people, so I'm pretty sure we're not seeing Yiti, which is China. But people are remarking on, wow, this seems racially diverse. The first and biggest announcement, they said this is the lead character, is Naomi Watts on October 30th. And this is the only character description we've gotten for anyone, is she plays a charismatic socialite hiding a dark secret. And, the book sites like Westeros.org were, befuddled that there weren't really socialites during the Age of Heroes. It wasn't the Middle Ages, the High Middle Ages, a courtly culture like Eleanor of Aquitaine or something. It was Bronze Age Druidic Britain. I guess you could say, like Marjorie Tyrell, you could say is a socialite. I think that's a modern term, but you could say that, because they're the PR department, they're the marketing guys. Or even like, a Vikings thing, like one of Ragnar the Vikings' queens, you could say, well, they're a socialite because they're involved in their court politics. You could do that, but it's the turn of phrase was just odd. I don't think we should read too much into that until we know more, but keep an eye on that. That was strange, but they didn't tell us anything. They were like people assuming, again, that she's some powerful warrior queen. All they said is that she's a socialite. They didn't say that. We don't know. And then Josh Whitehouse and a couple of other people. So this is everyone they cast, and I talk about more in the other video. A lot of these people they cast don't match up to the casting sheets that were put out. Like, there was no black man in his 30s. There was one in his 50s in the casting sheets. And conversely, a lot of the casting sheets actually haven't been filled yet. So just production hasn't started yet. We'll see where that goes. But point of all this is, and watch the full other video for more on that, the racial diversity is unexpected and intriguing given questions about the setting. That there are multiple black actors, and the role specifically we're saying this needs to be a black person. Who are they playing? That there weren't really black ethnic groups in Westeros at the time, and there was no intercontinental travel, wasn't nearly as good as it was in later ages. Yes, the Summer Islander ships were around, and that's as good of an assumption as any, or maybe they're from the East. We're not sure, but it's just, they're not First Men, and they're not Andals. What is happening here? And the only, again, there were no Latino or East Asian people. The one thing that wasn't white or African black was it says there's supposed to be a mixed race guy who's very prominent, and in what way, I don't know. So I've seen all this wild, baseless assumption on this. It's not even speculation. Of course, you've seen this. Please talk about this. going, wow, a black person was cast in this. Of course we'll see Essos. And what if they come to Westeros, but you never see their homeland? The most probable explanation is that Asshai can be any ethnicity. People from Asshai, there are no children in Asshai. I love that line in the books, that they reproduce by buying slave children from all over the world, and then raising them as the next generation of people from Asshai. So it's sort of like the magical antithesis of how the Citadel reproduces maesters. Well, they're not a nation, they're an organization. They're a religious order, magical organization. And even in Game of Thrones itself, from this screenshot, we have seen black red priestesses from Asshai. In one episode in Season 5, they even had an East Asian woman as a red priestess. So they can be any ethnicity. So also in the books, you had Makaro, who is in the Victorian Greyjoy storyline. He's black. So we have no confirmation that we'll actually see anywhere outside of Westeros on screen, and I increasingly suspect we won't even see anything outside of the North, for all we know, until proven otherwise. The only thing we can probably read from such a vague casting sheet, a list of people currently cast, is that at least one of these non-white characters may be from Asshai, due to the Azor Ahai story connections, and they said, well, Mysteries of the East. I would expect someone from Asshai to be in this. But Asshai is in the East, the Summer Isles are in the South. They don't mix those up. I'm not sure what they're doing. But I want to stress, all these people praising the diversity in this, they cast 3 black people, and you're praising them as a model of diversity when you have no idea what these character descriptions are like. Please explain that to me in the comments, just that they were cast, and you know nothing about them. Remember that the casting announcements for Season 5 Dorne honestly looked good on paper. Objectively, this is racially diverse and has many female characters. And it turned out to be insultingly awful. I remember being so excited about this that sticks in my mind, because at the time, around San Diego Comic-Con 2014, I was attending a wedding, a family friend's wedding, not a family wedding, that was in a different part of the country, so I was traveling there, so the only internet I had was the hotel's desktop computer in the lobby. And I remember gleefully, hitting refresh on all these Twitter live reports of, oh my god, Alexander Siddig is joining the cast as Doran Martell, and just how happy I was walking on air for that whole day after that, because we thought it would be as good as the earlier seasons. We had no reason to doubt them. That's just why it sticks in my mind, that really was exciting, and how it actually turned out. Remember that, on paper, when we got those casting announcements for Dorne Season 5, it looked good. And we thought, oh, well, maybe they'll cast Arianne later or something, but they cast 3 black people, gave you no description of their fictional characters. Why do you have any reason to think this will be better than how they were handling non-white characters in the past 2 seasons? How it'll be better than TV Dorne, or it could be worse than TV Dorne. So, the Long Night prequel isn't really based on established prior George R.R. Martin storylines or characters. He's even said he didn't write it. He gave advice. It's not his outline that they filled in. If they said, well, it's his outline and then we were filling it in, I would consider that written by him in broad strokes. The Valyria prequel's kind of like that. This isn't that at all. This is someone else's story. The setting is inherently problematic. Many things didn't exist yet, but are not replaced by other things. And the entire point of picking this in the first place was to appeal to nostalgia, and you went with the era that has the least things in it people would recognize. Beyond a soundbite of, it's got the White Walkers in it. How would you sustain that for 50 minutes? But even the casual viewers are going, the story sounds like a rehash of the White Walker storyline. And not just they're the same race, they're literally the same villains, because they're deathless. despite all of these problems, like I said at the beginning, I was getting hopeful that they would turn out something interesting. As any book fan, be kind of interested in the Age of Heroes. The things I was told about of what it's actually like will ruin some careers. They are not things we anticipated. They are not things in this list. It's not because it's a books to TV series difference. People who love Game of Thrones, even in its later seasons, people who didn't watch Game of Thrones will think this is a crazy TV show. And why is the burden of proof on me? That the arrogance of that, if we don't have to tell you what this show is like, we're greenlighting it as the prequel, that it didn't have to prove itself. And it will be funny looking back on this months from now. Hello, future people, I'm talking to you from the past that I called this, that I'm actually happy that all of the TV-only news sites and fan sites that are ardently defending the later TV seasons as how dare you criticize HBO, how dare you criticize Benioff and Weiss, are the same people who are now doubling down on the long night because it's what HBO wanted. They are doubling down on the Titanic. This will fail. And the other prequels, which are more in line with the books, we will see a return to glory with that. This will be, the failure of Long Night is a blessing in disguise. This will be how we turn back the tide. And I'm not lifting a finger. They're going to fail on their own merits.